agenda. I want to express a warm welcome to Amy Richmond, our newest board member, and our gratitude to the town board and the supervisor for continually finding such outstanding new board members. And I was reading Anna Karenina over the last couple of weeks, and then I discovered Amy's resume, and I found it much more complex. So she's highly credentialed and very, very well qualified. And thank you for accepting the appointment. Really going to be an asset to the board. And with that, we'll call to order. All members are present, including all of our consultants. Did everybody receive a copy of the minutes from last month? I did. Any questions, issues?
Move we adopt the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Correspondence, we have some. I'll get that over to you. Resolutions or decisions. We have no resolutions, do we, Dominic? No resolutions?
No resolutions.
Okay, discussion. Dominic, under discussion, we do have an item related to past projects. If we could put that, formalize that discussion, it'd be great.
Yes, the building department, which oversees the files that are pending projects before the planning board, has made a request that the planning board consider authorizing me to work with them to write a letter to applicants on 3 different projects. Applicants for projects that have been dormant for a significant period of time. The most recent one is over 5 years old, and the oldest one is going on 20 years old. Those 3 projects are Winding Creek, Camp Yedidim, and GD Pot, which was a lot line change. Winding Creek was a townhouse project that dates back to 2004. Gary advises that the zoning has already changed for that project, and the application has been dormant for a significant period of time. The Camp Yedidim project has also been dormant since 2018, and the lot line change, GD Pot, has been dormant since 2019. If it's all right with the board, I would work with the building department to craft a letter giving, for instance, the applicants, say, a period of time, perhaps 30 days or 60 days, whatever the board thinks is reasonable, to either come back and advise the town as to whether or not they're still pursuing the project, or otherwise the projects will be closed out.
Amy, new? No? Okay.
Mr. Kuniska, I understand that significant fees may be still owed to the town on some of these pending projects, so closing them out hopefully would help to resolve that issue.
Yes, in the case of Winding Creek, there's nearly $10,000 that's owed to the town in unpaid escrow funds. That would pay for the board's consultants in the review of these applications. The others also have outstanding balances as well. That obligation remains, and if it goes unpaid, it could be referred to the town board if and when these applications are deemed to be inactive and no longer viable for potential collection, if that's what the town board wants to do.
So I suggest to the board that our letter could reflect that we would want the building inspector to make recommendations in the future to this board at such time as he thinks that a project has become inactive, and we could act on that, to close it out. So that there's some sort of formal process by which a project comes to the attention of the board and we close it out.
So you're suggesting on a project by project basis?
But I think that once in a while, maybe once a year, as part of our, I'm trying to remember the name of the meeting where we kick everything off. At our reorganization meeting, it would be a good idea for the building inspector to bring forward, hey, here's this fistful of projects that are no longer active, and then we could close out our records and not carry them on our books.
Gary, do you have a recommendation on that?
I'd like to move on the 3 we have before you now.
I'm sorry? Sure.
I would like to move on the 3 we've recommended to you now.
Okay.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel, these are problematic files.
Fair?
But I appreciate Led's thoughtfulness, but I think these 3 really need to be addressed.
Okay, let's address them then.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not suggesting we don't do that, I just think maybe this is some part of our regular process.
Okay, shall we? Do you need a resolution?
No, just the board's consent.
By consent, by unanimous, with shaking of the head, with the unanimous consent.
Aye.
You now have unanimous consent,
Thank you, sir.
you move forward. Okay, great. Anything else on that one?
No, sir.
Any other items for discussion?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right directly into two girls, one boy holding it. We would want to simplify that name just a little bit. I'm stumbling, is it two girls, one boy?
Good evening, Bart Lansky, applicant, 2 Girls on Board Holdings LLC. Tonight I have Glenn Coben of Glenn & Company, our project architect. And I also have Stanton Letty from Prestige Hospitality Group, who's our operations people. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Glenn walk through the architecture with the board,
Sure.
and then kind of circle back to the request for the evening.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. Glenn Coben, architect, licensed in the great state of New York. You've all seen this package, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to start out, so what's really special about this hotel is it's what we refer to as a soft brand. Tapestry by Hilton. It's not your standard hotel that is a cookie cutter hotel. It gives us the softness, the soft brand, gives us the ability to create unique characteristics and really tie the design, tie the building, tie the architecture and the interior stories into make it feel as if it's part of the local community. So we're really mining the tales and the stories and the locale. You're not going to see a lot of that tonight because that's going to unveil itself as we go into the interior design of the specific spaces. But what's neat about it is that everything that we touch doesn't have to be part of a formula, a hotel brand's formula. And ownership is really very excited and has given us, not carte blanche, but the ability to be able to tell some of these stories and make this hotel a very special building and a special series of spaces for the local residents, for the local community. And I mean, I don't want to sound sort of highfalutin here that this will be a gateway to the town, but its location and scale, although we are within the setbacks and the height restrictions, that it will hopefully be something that the town can be very proud of and welcome visitors into home. So that being said, I'm just showing the exterior elevation first because it's hard to tell when you look at the rendering that the fifth story is actually a mansard roof. So we looked at scale, we looked at proportion, we looked at the height, and how do we get the proper number of guest rooms into the building. And some of the early studies, and I think there were some previous renderings that had been done by another firm that really maxed it out and made it seem like a very tall building. This is 60 feet to the top. And I want to point out that this upper portion is habitable, but it is sloped. It's sort of a roof, but it really is the facade of that upper story. So I'm not exactly sure how to do the flipping.
Let me do the flipping.
Thank you. Thank you. First, oop. We kind of. Technical difficulties here. So another aspect of the scale of the building is to create a 2-story base of the building. The lower level, we'll get to the floor plans. If you've seen the floor plans, I'll take you through them anyway, is public space. So there's a restaurant in the front and the hotel entrance is around the side. So really street-facing frontage is going to be a restaurant, but the 2-story section includes 1 floor of guest rooms. And again, we're not trying to delineate this as restaurant, guest rooms. We're trying to bring the scale in. We're trying to make it feel contextual, so it's relating to the other buildings. You can see here that fifth story, that mansard roof that's beginning to slope back. From this point of view, from this view angle, it does look a little bit taller, but that's why I wanted to start with that elevation, just to reinforce that idea. And that fifth story is also set back. So we have two guest rooms on the front and two guest rooms on the back, and I can take you to that plan as well, that have balconies. So we're trying to, not trying, because we're being sensitive to the neighborhood, the scale, and the idea that it's not just a 60-foot tall street wall, that it has a series of setbacks. So the first one is not a real setback, it's just a change of material and a slight cornice, and then 2 stories of hardy plank material, and then setting that back about 5 or 6 feet from the front facade of the building to the mansard roof. Any questions?
So what was the material of the first 2 floors there?
We're considering this as,
So the upper material is cementitious. It's a hardy material. The lower material, we're looking at slate and a few other masonry products. So something a little bit more durable.
and weighty, so that it is landing on the ground in a respectful manner. So, this is,
Given the way this is configured, that the traffic along the right side there and the left side between there and Fiddlesticks, during snow and ice periods when you're spreading salt and you're doing snow clearing operations, that part of the facade is gonna take a beating.
yes,
And I think if it's not a very durable, high-quality material that can be power washed and treated properly, it's gonna degrade quickly. So that was something, in looking at your renderings and everything else, I absolutely wanted to point out, snow clearing operations are just a reality. Plows are gonna nick it. You're gonna have snow blowing machines bang into it, people's cars, all those things, because it's a tight site.
yep,
Right, and we've been talking about the tight site right along here, and I just think with whatever materiality is needed there to defend that space appropriately, I am very interested in seeing a plan with a call out for what each of these 3 materials you're proposing for the facade are. So I didn't see any call outs in here that
No,
said,
this
like, hey,
is
this is what
still-
we're picking here, this is what we're picking here.
this is, I think, is it fair to say that this is still schematic design phase? And we're
Okay.
still in pricing and investigating exactly as you're suggesting, materiality, so that it is appropriate for a long period of time.
In response, really, the 2 materials for the bottom that we've looked at the closest have been a slate or a granite with that idea in mind.
Yeah.
So,
There was an early discussion about some type of a stucco, but that was ruled out. It just didn't make sense for the reasons that you're pointing out. Any questions about rendering? Want a tour?
I have a question on the height.
Yes.
You said 60 feet, I'd get 65 feet. On the scale that you have here.
So we are at 60, this elevation string is to 60 feet. 13'6", so our floor to floors, 13'6", 10'6", 10'6", 10'6". I'm not doing the math, but,
That's why I'm
then
wondering if my math correctly, I added differently than you did.
this is 40, 42, 55, 55'6".
The math teacher confirms 60.
Thank you.
What about?
I'm on TV here and I'm doing math, so.
All right.
And and sir, that's to the bulkhead. So the roof is actually
2.5 feet lower.
2.5 feet lower than that.
Okay. As long as the math teacher agrees. So it's 60 foot.
60 feet to the top of the elevator bulkhead.
And that's the maximum allowable under code, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And there's no HVAC equipment or blowers and junk like that up there on the roof.
What's the chemical?
There are some condensers, which are gonna be up on the roof.
But we're going to parapet.
So those are below the parapet level
Yeah.
shown.
Correct.
Okay.
And below the bulkhead, correct?
Right?
I didn't understand that they were having a condenser on the roof was gonna be counted in any way towards the, so we haven't determined the final locations. We did locate the condensers for the lower level along the back and then along the side, and we've added some screening on those. And the other ones which need to go to the roof are going to the roof. But generally speaking, we're stopping, the bulkhead is 2.5 feet above the roof level, and most condensers are around 3 feet tall. So I'm expecting us not to be, you're not gonna be able to see them from the ground, I guess is my answer.
But if they're above, you're saying they could be above the bulkhead?
No, they'll be around the bulkhead. They could, but they could be above 60 feet by a couple of inches or what have you. But I've never seen a board count condensers in the height requirement.
But I think just from a detailing standpoint, we've got 4'6" from the top of the upper roof to the bulkhead.
Okay,
So we'll be able to tuck it down.
okay.
And you're talking about exterior condensers? I don't see anything on the site plan showing exterior condensers. The reason I ask about this is because, again, it's fire access and loading docks and all that stuff.
We're talking about exterior condensers for the HVAC. And there are a couple on the rear elevation, and there's a couple on the Purdy's Lane elevation. And the rest of them are on the roof.
I'm looking at the site plan, sheet 1 of 7, and I don't see any.
Yeah, you're not gonna see them, they're not on the site plan because they're on the building.
If you look at.
Oh, they're not laying on the ground. They're-
No, they're not laying on the
If
ground.
you look
They're-
at
they're-
the elevation, west elevation,
Yep.
lower right are condensers on the building.
And how much do those protrude from the building? Because those are within the travel lane.
They're gonna be about 10 inches off the building and about 12 inches deep. So 20 some odd inches. But they're gonna be above the height of any car.
That's not what it appears.
That's not what it looks like on the rendering.
On the rendering.
On the Purdy's Lane side, that's the anticipation.
It appears to be only about 3 feet off the ground.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's something we can address.
But we're notching this,
Make a good point.
It's just, if there's any mechanical equipment protruding into Purdy's Lane, that's the width that has been contentious since the beginning of the project. So we would be quite interested in any loss of width to Purdy's Lane, to that travel space.
you want to show this?
Yeah, so, what Glenn's gonna show you on the site plan is that in that location, it was thought about, that Purdy's Lane is actually inside, and there is a piece of property, here, towards,
Yeah, the width is greater at that point.
yeah, so that's the answer.
Yeah. And so how much does the rear protrude into the sidewalk? Because there's condensers on the rear of the building? How much does that protrude?
About 20 some odd inches.
Okay, so does that affect ADA access to the building?
No, ADA access is, only on the east side. And
So, yeah, again, I'm not trying to sharpshoot here. I'm just trying to move the project forward to a point where we're all seeing all the details. The
Sure.
other one is bollards throughout, Sean. I didn't, there's no traffic limiting bollards protecting critical equipment or critical door swings. So when people are coming out, those doors that are shown where the no parking anytime is on sheet 1 of 7, right where that word no is right there.
Okay.
You can see the doors are swinging out, and it would be typical to have a bollard defending that, because you would not want someone, a resident, somebody coming out of the building, opening the door, and now here comes a car to unload, and you've got a narrow case, maybe someone's backing out of a parking space and restricting that space, and now the door and the car can interact. I would think that that needs to be, it's usually defended by a curb.
So the main hotel entrance, we've switched to sliding doors. It's not shown on the plan, but that's been a change we've made.
Even still, there needs to be space where an individual who's exiting the hotel, so usually you're exiting onto a sidewalk,
Yes,
right? Like most hotels, we think through like how we're leaving, we got our cart, we're pushing our cart in front of ourselves, heading into the parking lot, the cart precedes the person, and now there's a car potentially in that same space. I think, Sean, I'd just ask you to think about that, and
Sure.
and maybe chat with Phil really, just even briefly, about what the right way to make sure that that's a protected entrance. So I'm not used to seeing that kind of door, any kind of entrance or exit from a hotel without some curbing in between them and the automobiles. And if we can't get the curbing, that's fine, let's go with a bollard. Maybe it's even it could be a nice light, you know, it could look like a beautiful lighted sconce you'd find in your garden, but it's actually a concrete pole.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. That's a very good suggestion.
Yeah, we've had that same trouble with the facade of structures. I want to think specifically over in Vales Gate, where we had a vehicle come through the Dunkin' Donuts front. You know, that having some kind of system that keeps those front wheels, so you put it in drive instead of reverse, and there's a really lightly defended facade right there. You have to have some kind of provision there. And for those air conditioning units on the other side, similarly, if they're at a place where a box truck leaving the restaurant unload, because I'm also assuming that the doors that you're showing on the west facade, where it says 6-inch sewer lateral on number 1, that those doors are where you're gonna be loading in and out of your restaurant
Correct.
kitchen.
Yes.
So that means you're gonna have box trucks operating right there and probably muscling right up to the building side. Again, Sean, I would ask you to look at that, how we're defending those doors to make sure that we're safely operating at 5 o'clock in the morning when you're loading that breakfast.
Sure,
In
we'll
and
do.
out of that place.
No, that's a good point. I, on that side, isn't there a curb on that side? Is there a curb on that side? No.
No, I think this
Yeah.
is it's just a flat building right up.
Yeah.
The paving, I think the paving, it's very unusual, but in this case, the paving runs right up to the side of the building
Right.
throughout. And I'm not saying that's not allowable, I don't know that the code restricts that, but I do know that if you got a door where you're going in and out, you need a bollard or something there to keep the employees coming in and out of there.
No, that's good. That's a
Or the-
good suggestion. Certainly on that side where there will be deliveries
Yeah,
and they're not the.
yeah, I don't consider striping to be a sufficient defense of a pedestrian, right? In this kind of space, where you've got people unfamiliar with that space moving in and out, just
Especially
arriving.
when
at
it's
the-
dark.
Yeah, especially when it's dark. Right. So
Yeah.
that was my thoughts on the rendering. I have some other thoughts as well. We could listen. But, so, signs on the canopies, you're showing in your renderings a number of signs on the canopies. Those signs are not included in the sign package. Right, so the sign package that's in here, I know you're still developing this stuff,
Yeah.
I get it, so let's start with that. But those sign details would have to be called out. So the Hotel Cornwall sign package, I love the sign that's on the facade sign. I think that's great, and I love the name Hotel Cornwall. I think that's very distinctive and towards your softer branding that you were talking about. But
It's not a final name, by the way.
Still working, all right. Well, that's totally your look at it. I mean, that's your thing.
It will be an appropriate name, but,
Yeah.
that's in the hopper. but-
Sure. There was also a strange, it's probably a rendering artifact. There's like this giant signpost that's shown on the right-hand side there.
This one here?
No, go to more to the right.
This.
That thing, I don't know what the heck that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It might be, it came off of probably Google.
that was from the old auto dealer.
Yeah, and I think that post has been gone.
Yeah, that's the Bernicky sign.
You don't intend to leave that, is what I
No.
mean. Like, if it's
If
still
it's
there,
gone,
which I
it's
don't
gone.
think it is.
We're not
You're not
doing
hanging
that.
anything on that, nothing
No.
like that.
No.
Okay. The existing conditions in the Purdy Lane alley at the Fiddlesticks location are not consistent with what's actually there. You're showing 3 parking spaces in that location, and what's actually there is their dumpster and a freezer.
So we're working off of their site plan. So that's their approved site plan, and we had this conversation about taking the site plan and putting it into the document.
Well, it's a conversation with the building inspector, I suppose. The existing condition is that there is a dumpster back there.
And there's a walk-in box, but that's
I
not,
think that's true.
that's not what it's approved. So that, but that's what we're showing, because that's what we're showing what's approved.
Okay. And, you know, there's some method of moving garbage in and out of that place, you know, that needs to be consistent with your plan. Whatever your plan is, needs to be consistent with getting the garbage out of Fiddlesticks that's already the existing tenant. And again, if it's an enforcement issue, that's with the building inspector. Let's see, your operating hours, you made a call out in your letter about your operating hours. I guess you're gonna talk about that later.
Yeah, essentially, we do have someone here to answer those questions, but it's preliminary.
Okay. And in order to fully evaluate for the special use permit, I would think that we need to know what the finishes, you know, what it is you're actually planning to do. Because the rendering is one thing, but like, it sounds like there's still some decisions to be made as to what's actually being built.
There's some decisions on finishes, but in terms of form, this is what we are proposing and asking to be approved. So, there's always, as you go along, iterations and edifications, but this is the hotel that we are putting in front of you, and would like approved.
Right, but the consistency with the consistency which we're called on to judge as part of our special use permit granting depends on these exterior finishes. And so I would be uncomfortable proceeding with that judgment on its consistency with the neighborhood without, I don't know how the other board members feel, but without knowing what it is that you're putting on the thing, right? Is it gonna be, you know, concrete, or is it gonna be granite? Is it gonna be porcelain tile? Like, what is it? That would be to me relatively important. I don't know, Mr. Gradisco, I'd ask you about our special use, our duties under the special use permit.
Yes, there's a section of the code that is particular in connection with this. It's section 15841, deals with special permits. I could put you all to sleep by reading it, but I won't, unless you really want me to. But in connection with the, you know, the facade and the architectural details, the board essentially has to make an affirmative finding that what is being proposed is in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. It's essentially what it is, and there's specific findings that you have to make at the point where you're ready to consider granting or denying special permit approval. But that's ultimately is the overarching concern, is whether or not this is in harmony with the surrounding area.
Right, and given the scale of the structure, and, you know, I mean, this is a new use for this part of our Main Street, and I think the special use permit exists for us to consider these things in depth, especially for a project. This is a transformational project, which, you know, is gonna really change our downtown in some big ways. And so I think we should be considering these things deeply. And to me, that means knowing what finishes are proposed.
Dominic, is that consistent with your reading of the code?
That's correct.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'm just looking for call-outs on what it is that's actually intended. And the last thing I had was improvements to Purdy's Lane. I didn't see anything in the plan that calls specifically for repaving or a cross-section for the paving of Purdy's Lane in between, you know, back in the back there on the on the east side where Purdy's Lane goes next to the ambulance bay and all that back there.
Yeah.
That's a pretty, that section of road will get considerable use under this, when this hotel goes in, at least I hope it would. You know, I hope that there's I hope the hotel sees a lot of business. But that means that paving back there, like, it's in, Sean, I think you would confirm that's not in great shape, what's currently back there.
It's in fair shape. Sure.
Yeah. But there'd be deliveries going in and out. And everything else back there.
There's likely would be.
It's shown as an egress, and we do not have anything shown to replace that section of road at this time. Purdy's Lane is split up between 3 different owners, so it's kind of, it'd be hard to do the whole thing, because we don't have control over those other properties.
So walk me through then how a delivery is happening for the restaurant then. I'm just curious how that's happening.
It's coming in between the building and Verizon.
So
or
it comes down Main Street.
it comes down to Main Street, and they go out onto Clinton Street. I don't,
They go out which way now? Oh, they go out Clinton, so all deliveries would be going out.
everybody's expected to go out the back, that's the way the traffic flows.
So then that would make sense to me that we have to have some way of improving the paving back there because it can't take, in its current status, I don't know what cross-section it has in it or anything.
Not in why.
It's, that's a,
So does that easement, I mean, so that's a significant question then. Is there a difficulty with perfecting the easement? And who's responsible?
the
for
easement's perfected, what you're asking is something different. You're asking whether or not, applicant, should be compelled to go on somebody else's property and improve it as part of a site plan application. And I would, that's 100-year-old private right-of-way. I would say that this applicant is happy to work with the neighbors, and we are working with the neighbors, and we have 2 easements that we are filing with this, and we're coordinating storm drainage, and we'll be coordinating the parking lot. And as we're doing the construction, we're happy to work with that neighbor and see if it works out that we can pave that thing, but we wouldn't expect it to be a requirement as part of this application, because it's not our property.
But if there's a significant, so the planning board's question then would be, hey, this is part of how the whole place is working. What is the plan for maintenance of Purdy's Lane? So that's what I would ask. What is the plan for maintenance of Purdy's Lane? If 3 years from now it becomes, there's huge potholes and, we're trying to plow the thing and it's getting torn up.
There is no,
Who's responsible for plowing that?
Right.
Is there a maintenance agreement?
there is no
That's what
maintenance
I-
agreement for Purdy's Lane. It's been, for 100 years, it's found itself clean, and there's gonna be, the hotel is gonna be there, and they're likely gonna plow, but any agreement which is made in the future between this applicant and its neighbor isn't necessary to be part of this site plan application.
Purdy's Lane is also part of the fire egress question. It's part of how we would move ambulances in and out. I mean, it's essential. The plan doesn't really work without Purdy's Lane being a negotiable roadway.
Especially if all the deliveries are going out that way.
Yeah.
But
What happens when it snows?
I'm not saying it's not gonna be a negotiable roadway. I'm just saying that we don't own it. And there's a lot of properties in this situation where there's multiple owners of a piece of road.
But you have an easement over it.
We have an easement over it, but we don't have, it's not part of an HOA or the community where there's a maintenance agreement stipulated to. So we're happy to work with the neighbors. We're happy to work towards improving that and plowing it, but at this point in time, to ask a project to be held up for
But it's
that.
common for us to ask for maintenance agreements for essential access.
I think in the absence of a maintenance agreement, because you can't force someone to agree,
No.
right, but
That's-
in the absence of a maintenance agreement, since this project is relying on Purdy's Lane and access out to Clinton Street, that the obligation would be, if it's not maintained, it would be on the hotel's responsibility to maintain it, because there's deliveries, there's emergency access, there's people that are driving through there, and they're increasing the usage of that particular access through Purdy's Lane.
So that would be an enforceable provision, so Gary could, if they're not doing the maintenance back there, he could cite them?
With a note on the site plan, yes.
You could,
With a note on the site plan, very good. And I don't see anything on the site plan now that calls for a particular status of Purdy's Lane.
Right.
And that's my concern. My
And-
concern is,
and-
we gotta be able to plow that thing, we gotta be able to run ambulances, we gotta be able to run fire trucks, you gotta be able to run deliveries, all the clients and customers are coming out of there.
you can make it a condition of the special permit, probably easier than anything else. That's the.
That's
But
what
the
that's
enforceable,
Okay.
but the enforceable action is a note on the site plan. Because that's what Gary's looking to enforce.
Me, yes.
I thought Gary was retired.
He's not going anywhere until it's fulfilled.
The answer is it's both. It's both a condition of the approval and it's a note on the plan. That way the board is setting clear expectations of the applicant as to what they need to do, as well as the enforceability from the building department's perspective. But this also gets to, you know, when the board back in July granted preliminary site plan approval, one of the things that they were looking for at that time was a construction phasing plan, which we don't have yet. And the construction phasing relates to how construction is going to proceed on this site and how it's going to affect neighboring properties like Fiddlesticks, which gets deliveries, which presumably is going to continue to operate while construction is happening on this site. So that's one of the details that, you know, you've been given a lot of information tonight as part of this most recent submission, but that is one of the things that's still outstanding.
Well, can I ask about that? Because I was confused. You made the comment at the workshop, and I wrote up a phasing plan in terms of how long the various portions of construction would take. But since it's one site and we're not building it over, and we're building one building, and we're not building in different segments, I was confused that's what I assumed you were looking for. And you're saying you want something different, which I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Did you see the submission?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
so that's not what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, how does this impact Purdy's Lane during construction, I think is an open question.
Well, we're not planning on shutting Purdy's Lane down. So when we're working on the facade, we're gonna have to do it in pieces.
Right, but I think that's gotta be spelled out either on a plan or written, how that's gonna be maintained. And people protected that use Brady Lane currently.
Well, so there's a portion of Purdy's Lane where it's close, and there's a portion of Purdy's Lane where we have room to work. And the portion of Purdy Lane where it's close, we're gonna have to be in there with an articulating lift and other equipment, and it's not gonna be shut down for long periods of time, but, you know, a couple of days here, a couple of days there. I don't know which days, and I don't know how to put that on the plan. You know, there's only a small section where we're gonna really be into Purdy's Lane. And so I don't wanna fence off Purdy's Lane, I wanna maintain traffic. And so it's really just for a couple of days when we're doing certain things that we're gonna have to have some safety in place. But it's expected when we finish at the end of the day or a short job sequence that it's gonna be open again.
Okay, so detail.
I'm not sure.
I said, so detail that for us.
So you haven't shown any staging plan, like how the facade's going up. So a staging plan, like you could do a 4-foot staging, you could do 6-foot staging, you could do, I mean, you could hang it from the top, you could do legs from the bottom, like how are you doing your staging for hanging the facade?
Maybe that wall goes up from the interior of the building, so that, I mean, you have an easement across Purdy's Lane, but it's an easement in common with others who also have access to Purdy's Lane, so.
And only for access.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's, the building is intended to be constructed with the first floor steel and concrete, with a poured corrugated and poured deck. And then on top of that, it's gonna be wood framed. So for that first section, there is gonna be a couple of columns and a couple of beams, which are gonna require some coordination into Purdy's Lane. And that's probably gonna be a week, no more, where I'm taking a piece here and a piece there. And then after that, I'm doing wood. And I should be able to be off of Purdy's Lane from the inside. And then six months later, I'm gonna be doing siding and I'll be in a tiny bit, but not much. It doesn't make sense to fence it. It doesn't make sense to block it off.
You know what I'm talking
I do.
Okay.
You know, and I think it just needs to be thought through. What is Fiddlesticks going to be open? Are you going to ask them to close on those days? Just gives that some thought on how that's going to be working.
Right. Are they gonna be able to accept deliveries, get their garbage taken out? Things
Right,
like
relocate the garbage temporarily or.
Correct.
Yeah. I think it's totally doable. I just think there needs to be some description so that the neighbors will know what's going on. And that we can keep everybody safe during the construction period.
It's part of the special permit criteria that I didn't read to you, you know, how this affects, construction on other neighboring properties.
Right, I mean, and I love the general concept here of the stone below the hardy planking and then I suppose that standing seam copper roofs on top. I think it looks great. I love the mansard roof look to it. I love the contrast in the colors. The canopies look quite consistent with what we've got around other areas of the town. There's some really positive things about the look and feel of this project on such a tight site. So, we're kind of sharpshooting all the things we don't like this evening because that's our job is to get to, hey, here's the details that need to be squared away to get to the permit. And so I know it can come across as pretty negative. I do not mean to be saying that I think the project is out of scale or that the project is not workable within our downtown area or that I see significant obstacles to the special use permit beyond the details we've discussed. But these details are important.
Glad you made very good points. I think we should move forward.
I think it might be helpful to the applicant, to hear from other members of the board in connection with the architecture. No, I'm not, no, please, don't take offense from that. It's just
No,
that-
not at all.
That, at the work sessions, they were,
Okay.
at the work sessions, they were requesting, feedback, so that they could proceed, with their, construction level drawings for the design. And so having that feedback, I think, from the board would be helpful to them.
Again, now, has anything commented on, restricted our ability to conditionally approve a site plan?
Well, so the board had, back in July, granted preliminary site plan
Right.
approval, without granting the special permit approval, because the information wasn't before you at that time. And the preliminary approval was an interim step.
Right.
That was designed to allow them to go to, the county, DPW for the highway work permit and also to the village, and as well as give them a sense that, the overall general layout, was such that it reached a point where preliminary approval would have been appropriate. But that said, the next step would be consideration of special permit and conditional final site plan approval. And the applicant, you should know that, first of all, that it's only in Cornwall, once the board issues conditional final approval, it's only valid for 1 year. And there are no possibilities of extension. The code does not provide for that. And once it expires, then it expires. So the applications have to be made again, it has to be reapplied for. So you should factor that into deciding whether or not you're going to be able to get a building permit and start construction within a year. That said, I think that there are some details, as Colette had mentioned as part of his comments so far, as well as more details in connection with the construction sequencing plan. We haven't heard from the operator yet. I realize that there was been information that's been supplied in connection with that, but you have some parking cleanup items as well, with additional waivers based on the amount of seating that is now being provided. So the question is whether or not the applicant is requesting and the board thinks that it's timely to perhaps authorize a draft resolution for consideration at next month's meeting.
Well,
I think that that's something that you can consider, but it's been a hang up on other large projects, that have taken their project, to near the finish line, but then know to go across the finish line or wait to go across the finish line because Cornwall has very strict code as far as that approval is only valid for 1 year.
So the clock starts with the
Yes,
approval.
and then you have no
That's what-
choice but to, and if the year runs out and construction hasn't commenced, you have to reapply, and all that entails.
It doesn't need to be finished.
No, just
Construction
showing.
does
Building
not.
permit has to be full.
Building.
Okay.
I'm worried about the clock not starting, not the clock. And I did get a letter, which I'd like to submit, quite recently from the Orange County Department of Public Works, so that's the final.
I think we did get that.
Yeah,
We did
You got
Yeah,
that part of your package?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was resolved, and parking was the change, and that's developed with our conversations with Glenn and with Hilton, and, the conversations have been about having a more robust restaurant and how that's important to the hotel and important to Hilton. And so the number of seats has changed in that area. But we originally started off with a 60-room hotel. We brought it back down to 52, And we originally had other spaces in the hotel which had a seat count, like upstairs, we talked about having a entertainment space on the top floor, what have you. And now it's just the lobby, the restaurant, and the rooms. With a small meeting room and a small gym, which are accessory to the hotel. And so there is a larger request for a waiver, and thankfully, the town board passed a law which allows you to do that. And there is, I provided in my letter, information from the Urban Land Institute, which sets the standard for parking. And when they look at this, they look at the restaurant as accessory to the hotel. And when they look at their ratios, the amount of parking we have is right there. And so that's the major change that we have. And your code even provides that this restaurant is accessory to the hotel based upon the number of square feet within it. And so that's the request, is the waiver.
Waiver of the additional parking.
Waiver of the additional parking, where it would just be, so it's a request for a waiver and for a draft resolution, while we work out these remaining details.
Kristen, do you have any comments on it?
Yeah, I tried, I'm not a math teacher or an engineer, but I tried to, and also the applicant didn't give me any help with calculations, so I had to count, but I did try to just figure it out, because for the record, I think it's still important. I'm glad that the applicant provided ULI numbers, because it's a nice guide, but the actual requirements still come from the code, so I thought it was important for the record to just itemize what is required. And without going through all of this math, I tried to walk you through, based on the number of seats that the applicant shows in the floor plan, also the numbers in the floor plan are not correct. The restaurant, it says 50 on the label. It says 50 on the label. I just counted chairs. I didn't even count like the bench seats. That I didn't really get into details very much, but just the labels are wrong. So I think that those should be just updated. I just want it to be everything consistent and correct. So the label is wrong. The bar shows 18 is the number, 16 chairs. You could have 2 people sitting on the bar. We've all been there. But
I think that's the handicap.
Yeah, that's the,
I think it was a service.
Yeah, we have an ADA included, that's how we're getting.
It's, I want everything to just be consistent and correct and whatever, but my point is really that with those numbers, based on what the zoning requires, the total requirement is 87 spaces. There's 53 spaces shown on the plan. So the request is actually a reduction from, what is currently shown on the approved site plan was a requirement of 75 spaces, reduction to 53, which were shown on the approved plan. Based on the increase in seats in this restaurant and bar area, the total requirement would be 87 parking spaces. Again, the applicant still shows 53 parking spaces. So that is the request.
Is not the request, again, we defer to the math teacher, but is the request for 25 additional spaces? Is that, or
34.
34?
34 spaces according to what
That's that
And
would be the difference between
Right.
the total zoning requirement versus what is provided on the plan.
Precisely.
And you're counting the space of the seats outside.
Yeah, we talked about that at the workshop, that the zoning code does not differentiate between a bar stool versus a patio seat versus a restaurant seat. The code just says seats. I don't, like I said, I don't think that one of those seats or any of those seats would be different. They wouldn't change necessarily. Someone from the hotel would be more likely to sit outside versus inside. So, all of those seats would or could potentially generate another customer, so a person with a car. So that's where the code doesn't differentiate.
Yeah, I would just say that.
But I think that that's relevant to the fact that you request, which is to reduce it. What's relevant is you believe that the majority of your customers and people that will be sitting in these seats will also be will also be hotel guests.
And that's what the UI finds, is that the restaurant is accessory to the hotel. And I would say particularly seats outside are accessory to a hotel. That somebody who is waiting to be picked up to go somewhere may sit outside and read a newspaper, but not necessarily be at the restaurant. And so there is the change in some part relates to that exterior. And, you know, we are requesting a waiver, and I appreciate the math and math teachers, they're very important.
I'm a social scientist, not an engineer.
So, let me get it, can I get it just straight, John, I'll go out here. What is the number of spaces that we're looking to create this waiver for? Can somebody please tell me?
87?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
87 down to 53
yeah.
is what Kristen's document says.
So I believe we already granted a 30% waiver
Correct.
previously. And the new waiver would require 44%.
That's why we need engineers.
Well, no, I actually, so the calculation was here.
That's what I was.
Is that-
Okay, does everybody get it now? So we're looking at for a waiver of 44%, not 100%, correct?
Does that sound correct?
Yes, the 100% relates to the fact that the town board.
You have the
modified
authority
the
for
code.
that, yes.
Correct. Yeah, you do have the authority to grant such a waiver.
Yes, okay, thank you. Sean, do you have oh, Kristen, you have completed?
That's the majority of the mental anxiety. The rest of it is really just the special permit, which we talked about. The hours of operation, I think we talked about the majority of this. I did just want to mention the signage package. I think as Led mentioned earlier, some of the side door sign was not part of the signage package. I think it's important to appreciate that the applicant's signage is probably not finalized, because they don't necessarily have an operator that knows exactly what it's gonna say, which is fine, because typically this board allows Gary to approve final signage design, so long as the sign, from a dimensional perspective and a size perspective, conforms with the zoning. And I think that from the zoning perspective, the sign that's shown on the front facade, that sign is permitted, the size is consistent with zoning. And the zoning also allows where a building has two main entrances, this building obviously does, it does allow for the second facade sign. So the second sign is permitted, and so long as it appears from the rendering that's smaller than the front facade sign. So as long as it conforms to zoning, the applicant can go get permits from Gary for the final, whatever the sign is gonna actually say.
And we could include a condition to that effect, you know, in the draft, conditional final.
Okay. That would be my final question, but sure.
The other thing with the signage I just want to mention is that, for the most part, with traffic signage, I defer to the engineer entirely, but I just think that there should be something to kind of tie the signs in the signage package to the site plan. So the important thing isn't necessarily, I mean, obviously this traffic signs, they have to be consistent with, you know, uniform traffic code, but the locations I think are important. Probably tie these signs to something on the site plan, like where they're actually gonna go. Whether you just, correct, whether you just number these and number them on the plan is fine. They just somehow have to, in the end, Gary needs to know what is going where. So, that's all I have.
Thank you, Kristen. Sean, did you have any comments?
Yeah, just two. One was a carryover comment from last time, confirming the ADA access to the building on the site. At this point in time, I don't think there's enough information via spot elevations to confirm that, so just looking for the applicant's engineer to either add spot elevations and evaluate to ensure that there is proper grades from the handicap parking stalls to the building. Secondly is, Mr. Lansky noted that Orange County DPW did grant a conditional approval, but there are still the Village of Cornwall and Hudson and Orange County Department of Health approvals that are outstanding for the water main improvements.
The village issued us an agreement.
We have all received a copy of that.
And that's as far as they go until we're ready for construction. So,
Right,
Again,
again,
condition of approval, that you actually have something in writing for them that they approve.
plan.
Correct.
I have what they're willing to give. We had that conversation with them, and they've issued a contract. And short of sending them a retainer and executing the contract, that's what they.
Right, and the retainer is for their engineer to review the plans to ensure that they conform to the village requirements. So that will, after that's been satisfied, the village will send a sign-off letter on the plans technically to make sure that they conform with the village requirements. That's what we're looking for.
And that'll be conditioned.
As a condition of approval.
Correct.
Is that doable?
Well, as a condition of the approval that we have, you can't build a hotel without approval from the village. For the water main. I'm not sure what, it seems like a cart and horse issue, but fair enough.
Well, let's clarify it so that we know all leaving here what the story is. So Sean,
Sure, so as Dominic was pointing out, I would take no exception to that being a condition of approval, that the site plan not be signed until that approval is in hand from the village.
okay, so condition of any site plan approval would be such.
Correct.
It's a condition in your preliminary approval, they would just be carried
And those are all
forward.
good, you're the pretty ladies, as long as we have them lined up, we know what they are, and the final approval is not granted until those conditions are met. I think the board is satisfied with that. Am I correct, board? We can continue the discussion, but I just wanted to make sure that it's on the table. You have more stuff?
No, that was it.
Okay, Mary Beth, did you have any comments?
I have to say, I do agree with Led when he talks about the facade and having that information to us, stated as to how we'll be moving forward. I know other businesses, or other projects, they do have all that information that they provide.
You're talking about the materials?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. My other concern about that is, we had a public hearing, and the public hearing was for one facade or vision, or what they, the public and the residents of the town thought that was going to be built. So I would definitely be looking for public comment on a different look from the town, because I understand things change and evolve, but we have not heard from the public in regard to this change for our Main Street. I do agree with having everything in writing in regard to the process and how the construction is going to take place. I know myself, as someone who does go to Fiddlesticks and does use Purdy Lane at times, that would be something that definitely how it affects neighbors and how it affects just the average person who's on Main Street and does business on Main Street. In regard to construction and that plan layout, so I agree with, again, my co-member here. My question in regard to the parking is, that additional lot that was next door, that was talked about. How is that pertaining to any parking or what's happening with that lot? That was discussed originally?
It was not part of this application. We have had several iterations with the adjoining lot, which has a different owner and title. And the town about doing some type of public parking there. There were some other attendant issues with that, particularly stormwater, where we haven't gotten to a resolution on that, but it's not part of this design. It would be great to have that built, because it'll augment the downtown and have additional parking, but it's not part of this submission.
My other question is, oh, well, of course, when it comes to then the use of the other lot, and I see there's an easement to be able to have the refuge there. Is there, I looked at your easement, is there, this is a never-ending easement right away that the dumpsters will stay there forever?
It's
Or
not
is there a
for-
time period that?
It's not for a life or for a period of time, it's for, it runs with the land, so.
Just wanted to check on that, because I don't know of too many projects where that's been the case, where that's on another parcel,
We
so
have
that's
a,
why
we
I
have a
wanted to
tight parcel
question.
and we're doing our best.
And, the other question I have, oh, in regard to hours of operation, I think that's fine, 6 AM to 10 PM. Basically would be the hours. I did see where for emergency workers, I wasn't quite sure as to what that was referring to. Is that if the town has a state of emergency, the hours would be open, or what?
Well, so I was asking, I spoke with, Prestige Hospitality, which is our operations, group, and they're gonna be managing the hotel. They haven't picked the final operator, and those are the hours which they're recommending, the restaurant be open. Obviously, the hotel is open, 24/7. But there are times, when, there may be something that we want to keep the restaurant or bar open as long as allowed by New York State. In one circumstances, if there's an emergency, there's not, this, we've had thoughts about using this as an emergency service center. And so that's the train of thought, that we didn't want to be restricted that, this one particular restaurant can't stay open, while the rest of the restaurants in town or in the area can. So that's, but that is what our operations is saying will be the hours at this time.
Then when it also, I know that's for the hospitality portion, but any discussion in regard to the actual occupancy of guests?
I don't understand the question.
And I know I brought it up at the last meeting in regard to length of stay for occupants. Would it be, I would prefer 2 weeks. I would prefer 2 weeks.
I would like him to answer that.
If it was 30 days, it would be 30 days.
Yeah, our length of stay will not be necessarily restricted, in terms of, it's not like somebody can't stay, beyond 2 weeks. Typically, we do try to, ask guests to not extend beyond 30 days. Otherwise, there's some residential, concerns there. But beyond that, there's also Hilton, which is, the brand that we're working with. And they have certain requirements as part of being a brand and, restrictions on the limits you can set on the reservations.
They do have restrictions?
I was just gonna say, and what might they be? Could you elaborate on that?
I'd have to look at the exact language, but there are restrictions on the limits you can place. So they don't want you to place restrictions on your customers' reservations. But you do have limits you can impose if you decide to.
Yeah, and as part of the special permit, the board does have broad discretion, so if this was something that you wanted to spell out as part of your special permit approval, you might want to think, the 30 days actually stems from the New York State Building Code, which deems that hotels as part of transitory stays, which are stays that are not in excess of 30 days. But if there was a rationale for it, there has to be a rationale. Remember that there has to be a connection between, the legality of your conditions associated with it. It just can't be arbitrary in terms of picking a date out. But
Well, that's why I said I would prefer 2 weeks, but I
Yeah.
understand 30 days
Yeah.
would be a reasonable amount of time. So that's why
But I think
mentioned
it
that.
would be appropriate to include that as a condition as part of your special permit, that this hotel is not intended to be and cannot be occupied, for stays longer than 30 days, consistent with the New York State Building Code.
And is that a reasonable consideration?
I believe so. For the most part, it's not going to.
Okay. Dominic, if we were to consider a resolution saying we would incorporate all of these into as additional?
My suggestion would be, since it's fairly complex and we want to make sure that we're covering everything that the board, if you're comfortable with it, authorize me to prepare a resolution for next month's meeting to consider.
Right, okay.
That way you have the opportunity, and I would prepare it in advance of the meeting.
And you would incorporate all of these little.
I would hopefully.
And the applicant's documents would reflect
Yes.
the requested changes.
It also gives the applicant an opportunity to submit again for the October meeting.
Right.
Addressing any outstanding comments or concerns that the
Yeah, that's fair.
applicant.
Construction plan, bollards, all the things we talked about.
Okay, Amy, would you have a comment on all of John's part?
I'm nothing beyond what was
Okay, Bill?
I'm just curious about how you're gonna handle the fiddlesticks conversation when you tell them you're gonna hold it to driveway. I'm sure you'll
Well,
negotiate.
we've already, spoken to the owner there.
The owner of the property?
The owner of the property, there's a new owner of the property, and there is an easement, that we're doing stormwater across, their lands that enter into the, stormwater main on the street. So there's a relationship, and we expect to continue the relationship. And which means you have a right to improve your property, but they have a right to not be unduly impacted. So we just need to navigate what's reasonable under the circumstances.
So you'll respect that.
Yeah, of course.
Steve, do you have?
Just to reiterate the importance of noting a plan with regard to the easements and Purdy's Lane to ensure that there is an enforceable method for maintaining and keeping it open, plowing, that sort of thing.
I mean, in the absence of an agreement, I think it's going to fall on the hotel owner or operator to maintain Purdy's Lane, because it's integral to their site.
And there could be a note on the plan.
Yeah.
Yes, in the condition. That one I haven't done.
Just,
And in mind for the site.
Okay, good.
Is this the first draft with the terrace in the rear of the hotel? I know the first one had the rooftop bar.
I think we had a terrace in the front and the rear, but I don't think we submitted the rear elevation previously. So this may be the first time you're seeing it.
Okay. I'd be curious of what the visual is from that rear terrace of, are we looking at neighbors' pools, like being 50 feet up high, you were overlooking, the front terrace makes sense to me, you're looking down Main Street, traffic circle. The rear is mostly a residential setting, so I'd be curious what is the view?
It's actually nicer.
That's what you told us.
Yeah, we put up the drone, and we took shots at each level, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And when you're looking front, you kind of get a little bit of Hudson if you're looking towards the south, but not great. But when you're on the backside, you get the mountain, and you're kind of above looking at somebody's one-story house, you're seeing the mountain. And it's pretty, and you can get some sunsets, and it's a nice spot.
I don't disagree with that, but you also will, if you
But
look
we're
down-
far. See, keep in mind on the site plan how far we're set back from Clinton. I don't know the number, but we're a good ways away from.
200 feet.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you're 200 feet.
So we're about 180 feet before you get to more than that, 230 feet until you get to the house. And then you only have one house, you have the ambulance corps, and
It's the
then
houses
be-
across the street.
And then by the time you go across the street, you're 330, 340 feet. It's a good long ways away. And it's only on the 5th floor.
Right.
And you're up pretty high. You're seeing the hill.
Could you share with us the footage you have?
Yeah, of
Or
course.
the pictures, the
Yeah, of
next
course.
submission? Okay.
Yeah, happy to.
Awesome, thank you.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
And then you had one further point.
No, I've resolved.
Sorry?
So the 4-foot-high decorative fence that you're showing on the east side, in the far east corner
Yes.
there, is that gonna have some sort of weave inside it or something? The reason I'm asking this is because we've often considered headlights and the intrusion of headlights onto active adjacent residences, and you're gonna have those 7 or 8 parking spaces back there.
I'm up over 8 feet here.
And that's on top of the retaining wall.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're far enough where we're not gonna have a headlight issue.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, then all the other stuff is.
All right, and Dominic got every bit of it. Did Dominic not?
We'll see.
We will see when I ask the board if they would like to ask you to prepare a resolution for next month with all those conditions on it. Board, what are your feelings about that?
I think we need to address the parking request
Let's
first.
incorporate.
I was going to incorporate that in as part of the resolution, and that way you make the determination at the same time that you vote to adopt the resolution. Unless you want to grant the waiver now. Of course. It does give it.
Well,
My thought process.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just
I
gonna
have,
say.
when the town board passed the law, I expressed concern of them passing authority to this board that I felt the board should not have had. So personally, I don't know how I feel. I don't have an answer today of how I would probably vote on the parking request. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, well, that would indicate, if Dominic were to incorporate that into the resolution, if you do not feel comfortable with the parking request as part of the resolution, you vote no on the resolution. So,
I see what you're
deferring it a
saying.
month.
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Or can it be a separate?
It could be a separate vote.
Would you prefer to have a separate resolution for that,
A separate
or?
resolution.
Without
for-
the waiver.
Well, without the parking waiver, the site
so-
plan, so.
Precisely, so incorporate it into the prepared resolution, and we can discuss it at that point. It gives you a month to consider it, and then, okay, I got that, and that's good, okay.
And if there are specific concerns, I'm happy to go to the next work session and try to do my best to address those with the submission, with any concerns brought up at the work session.
I think my parking concerns are more a principled concern of the town board's actions than any particular applicant.
As long as it's part of the resolution consideration, I think it gives us a deferred month to think about it and then discuss it at the next meeting. Okay, Steve,
Oh, I'm good with that.
you go with it? You're right? Okay. Okay, Dominic,
But
would
I-
you please prepare a resolution for the next meeting, incorporating everything that everybody said?
Well, yes.
So Sean,
We'll try to get that to you before, so that you have time to review it before.
Okay.
I would appreciate it, a couple of those issues, especially the Purdy's Lane issue, the facade issue, the bollards and pedestrian defense issues, that these are spelled out clearly on the site plan that we see next month in order for us to consider because I wouldn't want to leave further condition, I would not want to adopt the conditional final with conditions that are gonna
Still
be
outstanding.
still outstanding.
I think,
But I think
everybody
I
understands
think
that.
we could give clear guidance if there are tweaks that need to be made.
Yeah, like if
To
we're
any
moving
of
the
those.
bollard a foot one way or a foot the
Right.
other, that's fine, but if no bollards are shown on the plan at all, or there's no notes on Purdy's Lane, that would be a non-starter for me at least. And I just should be clear with the applicant about that.
I think that's gonna go.
It's clear, crystal clear.
Okay, okay, Dominic, good luck. I thought Amy's resume was complicated. You're in for it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
With that, we have item lot 3 apartments. And I'm sorry for the delay. All set. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Zach Pearson with Insight Engineering here on behalf of Idlewell Creek Apartments for an amended site plan for an additional parking spaces on the property. Our involvement came about after a building inspector violation There's been some parking violations on the site in the recent past, and the applicant came to us and looked to see if we could find them some additional parking spaces. A little bit of history, we were not the original design engineering project. It was done in the late 90s, reviewed and approved by your board in the late 90s. There was a parking variance granted, which reduced the number required by 44 spaces. Times have changed, I think, I mean, in talking with the owners, the adult, this is an, what's the right word? Active adult facility.
It's now active.
It's now active adult.
When it was built, it was, I think, less active than what.
Well, right, so that's my point.
That's the problem.
They're more active now, and they're certainly coming and going a little bit more as compared to where they were at that point. So what we did is we found net 18 spaces on the site. Most of them are in areas kind of at existing kind of hammerheads or ends of parking. So we were able to catch one here, a couple, this is the main entrance to the building, right in this location. A couple here, 2 here. We did get a bank of 12 in the back by the pool area. And then there's another one here where we kind of just modify some of the existing islands to catch an additional space here or there. This was the big one though, 6 additional spaces in this location. This was, like a 12-foot wide like sidewalk. I believe that was for fire access to the back of the building, so we did respect that. We kept a 25-foot wide opening here, flush curb. Again, no real difference to emergency services coming in this location to get to the back of the building. The parking's off on either side. The total disturbance of the project is 8,000 square feet and change. So 0.19 acres.
Have you already spoken to emergency services?
I have not, no. I've talked to the owner and they kind of let me know how that area was kind of used in the back. No change to the circulation around the buildings. Again, all the driveways and things were to stay. This area here, we did propose some striping kind of out front. That was a little bit of a, when you pull in, it's really confusing as to what's going on. It's just wide open, vast expanse of asphalt from side to side. So we did kind of formalize that. No curbing, just striping, just to kind of keep people, flowing.
That's just an improvement. It has nothing to do with the parking spaces.
It has nothing to do with the parking spaces, but it's just, they wanted to, the applicant's been working with the residents to try to get them to park where they're supposed to park. And this was just one thing that, we tried to keep them from anybody double park. They've had people double park behind people that are nosed in, and then they can't get out. It just becomes
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Kristen?
Certainly, so I really think that you covered most of all of this. Project site, so the tricky thing about this application really is that the project site is currently in the town's SR1 zoning district, but was approved under entirely different zoning. So while the zoning on the site plan shows what it was approved at 20 years ago, the town has since that time changed the zoning designation. Now that senior housing is still permitted as a special permit use, so that's not an issue there. But some of the regulations that were applicable at the time have changed. And coverage being one of them, of course. Because why wouldn't it be the only one that's applicable to this entire project? So at the time, this site plan was approved, there was a requirement for building coverage. At the time, that was the only requirement. So building coverage, obviously percentage of site covered by buildings, not development coverage, which is what we have today in the zoning code, which regulates the total amount of impervious surfaces. That we don't have a standard to hold the applicant to is my answer. The site was approved, it was conforming at the time, and now they're increasing the total coverage by, 2%. So it's going up 2% because they are paving a couple of the spaces on the inside of the court there. I don't have anything to say. I mean, the total coverage currently exceeds what the zoning requires because they were not held to that requirement at the time of the approval. They're increasing it by 2%. There was no maximum development coverage at the time, so.
Excuse me, Kristen, does that increase of 2% mean 2% more blacktop?
Correct,
2% more of the total site?
correct.
Correct.
So that's kind of the only riddle, if you will, with this application. Everything else is pretty straightforward. I would recommend that the applicant update the parking table to reflect the garage spaces, because it's really only, just so you have a full picture on this plan, because you know, from the building department's perspective, you're always pulling out the latest plan.
Yeah, that's
It's really better off,
why we kind of put the table on there, because the engineer at the time, there's 170 spaces, right, which included the spaces in the garages and I believe in front of the garages as well. So when we did our parking tabulation, we were just looking at, you know, the units around the perimeter all have garage space. The horse, you know, this building and the one in the back are the two buildings that have just there's no.
So the ratio is to the two buildings in the middle and the back, and doesn't include the buildings to the block?
Well, yeah, on the table we provided, we just counted the number of external parking stalls, right? So we didn't get into, you know, what each of these units had here because they had their garage / parking spaces in front of the garage.
yeah, it's honestly, it's not totally relevant to this application, because the fact of the matter is there is a demand for additional parking. Doesn't matter what you're counting or how many there are there today, there's additional demand that the applicant is trying to provide for. I really only suggesting doing it because just so that the whole picture is there, because again, the building department's just usually pulling out the last and latest plan.
So Kristen, if this project were a consideration day exclusive of the garage parking, they would require those extra spaces, we would require those extra spaces in Worthington.
I don't know if the parking requirement has increased since this was approved. But even the variance runs with the land anyways, so it's hard to say what would be required today. If it was a new application, this was a raw piece of land.
Right.
Yeah, it would be a different animal entirely.
Okay.
And we did try to, you know, we did look in the rear of the property. I'll flip this back around. You know, there is a large wetland in the back behind this unit. Back in here, we did look at this area. It was just, there wasn't enough.
I don't think you want to do that.
You wouldn't want to push anything back there. It was too impactful to the environmental.
I think our new planning board member would really know a bit of a revolution.
Yeah, so we did look at that, so we said, hey, if we can keep all of the improvements in already developed areas, I mean, that keeps our.
Sorry, Kristen.
Oh, that's okay. So in terms of seeker, the applicant did provide an EAF. This appears to be a type 2 action based on the total square footage of additional development. So nothing further to do there. The project did require a GML review by Orange County Planning Department. We did send a referral package last week to get that in process. The zoning code allows for the planning board to waive a public hearing for a site plan amendment, but has a mandatory public hearing requirement for a special permit. This is another interesting discussion because the use is a special permit, but this request before you, the application is really to modify a fairly minor site plan element. The use obviously staying exactly as it is today. No question there, no real items in the special permit, now that you're all familiar with the special permit language. None of those items are really impacted by this. So Dominic can probably be more clear than I am, but your code allows for a discretionary hearing if this is a site plan amendment, which I personally think that it is.
So it's still discretionary as to whether you want to go with that. So we'll discuss that with our attorney.
Yeah, the
after
special
we-
use permit exists and it, like,
So the question is whether or not, well, we can move to that question after we hear from Sean.
Sure, so I had a number of cleanup items, but two bigger things stood out to me. The first was the need for additional drainage facilities with the additional asphalt and parking area. There was some grading provided, but no additional catch basins or conveyance. So I just asked the applicant to look at that, see if there is a need for any. And then the second one was if there was a need for additional lighting specifically for the interior court where the parking lot is being expanded, so.
Very good. Well, let me, before we go to the board for comment, Dominic, let me just ask you about that public hearing question that Christian actually was articulated so well.
It was, I couldn't top that. I would say that to cut simply is that the use isn't changing. It's like the senior housing is going to remain senior housing, going to add more parking. We're doing so, add to the prodding of the town. It's taken over that the building inspector has cited for issues in the past in connection with how parking is being conducted on the site. And this is in response to that. So they are trying to address issues that have been on the site in the past. And so as a result, with the use itself not changing, I don't see this as a special permit amendment. I see this as a site plan amendment. And Kristen is absolutely correct that the board has the discretion. I'm not suggesting that whatever way you decide, but you have the ability to waive public hearing if you so choose.
Okay, so we know we have that discretion. Okay, thank you. Did you have any more, Sean?
I did not.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. With that, Steve?
I'm in total agreement with that discretionary waiving public hearing.
So you suggest that we apply our discretion and waive the public hearing? Okay.
Should I second that?
You can if you'd like.
Was that a motion, Steve?
It was not a motion, it was just an opinion.
Just an opinion.
We're looking for opinions around.
I agree. My only question is, are there any more handicap spots required? Is that a ratio?
So I did look at that. They already comply with the existing handicaps.
There's no ratio, that's a question of the question.
Yeah, is there a requirement?
There is a ratio. They do not go above what is required.
So all new spaces can just be parking spaces, and that's the
Standard
plan?
spaces.
Okay.
Perfect. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you, Mary Beth.
I'm happy to see that you considered the wetlands. I remember when the project came originally, and that was a great concern for the footprint of the parcel. And I will also say that I am a person who always likes to hear from the public, but I can say that there were quite a few public hearings and public input during the original process of the plan. So we did hear from the public also at that time.
Well, I will point out, this is a good thing because it appears to open additional spaces, but the issue will be. Go ahead. Are you, Mary Beth, you have more?
No, I know what she's gonna.
Yes.
she's
Well, I
coming.
think it was sort of addressed with the fact that it's only 2%, so it seems rather minor, the 2%. But of course, I am interested in water, and how, the water, like, if you turn these surfaces into, asphalt, what that means for stormwater drainage and catchment.
Yeah.
Especially since there is wetlands and there is a creek nearby, so.
So all the areas, we've showed some grading, and we can clarify that further. Some of these areas are gonna pitch to the existing drains. The existing on-site drains go to a stormwater basin out front that was designed to treat the stormwater. In my opinion, like the increase of 8,000 square feet is not gonna significantly change the stormwater development that's already on site.
And I do appreciate how a lot of these are sort of tucked into, I think it's sort of tastefully done, not torn off.
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, to work inside of the existing kind of envelope of what was already developed and try to find spots. I will share that we did look at some spaces along this edge here that would have required, massive intrusion next to the building with retaining walls and things like that. There was another space on the south side of the building as well that, to put these walls in to kind of change what was happening right tight to the building didn't really make sense for, you know, a lot of
I always like public hearing, but I don't think we need one in this case. But I'm sure you're gonna see Sean about some of his comments, especially his number 4, the drainage.
That was his concern about, right?
Yeah.
And that's mine as well, Sean. I'm guessing that the reference storms and the stormwater requirements have changed since the original design took place in '99.
They have, however, there's no need to amend the existing drainage.
So the existing drainage has capacity under current code to receive the additional impervious space.
The original design does not meet the new design requirements. However, based on the amount of disturbance of this application, it does not trigger the need to revisit it.
Okay, so we don't trip over
That
the
was really
4,000.
well worded.
We don't trip over the 4,000 square feet, which would make
The
us.
1 acre.
It's 1 acre.
That would make us pursue an upgrade of to meet current code.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Accepted.
And yeah, and I also am always a big fan of public hearings, but in this case, I don't see that's a productive use of public
hearings.
time.
Looks like we're talking about. Okay, with that, let me first approach that public hearing. So, yeah, from consent, it appears as though the board will waive the public hearing. And does that require a resolution or a vote?
No, we would encapsulate it in the approval resolution.
Okay, so the board by consent agrees that the public hearing can be waived under current circumstances. The second question is, does it require a environmental review written?
It does not, it's less than 4,000 square feet, so it makes it a type 2 action. Once it's been identified as that ends in the environmental review.
Okay, go ahead with say. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We do have I think we talked before the meeting of the need for public emergency services review of this. You alluded to it, but it doesn't seem as though it's been formalized. There was some concern expressed in informal conversation as to having some discussions with the emergency services. My recommendation would be possibly to consider, the board to consider a resolution approving the change conditioned on discussions with the emergency services and to consider it for the next hearing meeting. Would that be reasonable?
Yes, and also the applicant, could have those discussions in the meantime, so it could be something that's wrapped up between now and the October meeting as well.
Is there a formal process to just call the fire department and do it, you know, is there a formal? I know some municipalities you go to where we have to submit to the board then packages it to.
It's all in writing in town.
It should go through the building department. So,
And the fire inspector should also take a look.
Sure.
Okay. So,
and the other thing is, as Kristen had pointed out, this application requires referral to the county planning department. That was just made on August 28th. So the board's not in a position to take any action tonight because they have to provide at least 30 days to review the application. But that timeframe will run through your October meeting. If the board's inclined, we can certainly prepare a draft resolution for the October meeting, assuming that the county referral is timed out, as well as any comments, if any,
from emergency services
and fire inspector have been addressed.
well, I think that's very fair. Would the board, would you consider that? The shaking, with the alternative shaking of heads? Yes, okay. Fair. Thank you. Okay, Dom, then we'd ask that you prepare Dominic. We'd ask that you prepare a resolution conditioned on all this.
Got it.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, with that,
Did we adjourn?
I'm second. All in favor? Thank you very much, board. Good job.